to go out. Did you want to do like a little recap of what you just said to contextualize?
Yes, thank you. Now that the recording has started, I would basically welcome to session 3 of our Lifeboat Academy annual planning process. Our goal tonight is really to think about how does the organism that is the Lifeboat Academy at Spalding Valley Farm interact with its environment? What are the inputs that we need, that the organism needs? What are the outputs that we produce? And how do they return again to us as healthy, renewing inputs? And then once we've established that, we also want to talk about what are the organs within the organism that turn those inputs into the outputs that we're hoping for, and how do those relate to each other. And the way we're going to do it is really leaning into the circle process. So we'll start by trying to answer that first question. How do we see this organism interacting with the environment? And then we'll move into, and how do we organize internally to make sense of that? And it's very much an experiment. So we'll run the experiment. We'll see how it goes. Are there any questions? Does that make sense? We'll figure it as much as it can. It's clear as mud. So that's it's an emergent process. We'll see. All right. So and I think I'm asking if this makes sense to people. To start off with, I think I'm going to stop share the screen share, and I'm just going to take some notes as we go through the circle, and then we'll come back, and I think I'm hoping that as we talk through it, my experience of the circle is that oftentimes things start off feeling very amorphous, and then they kind of land, and there's oh, okay, so really what we're saying is this. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop the screen share, and we'll just go into note mode until clarity starts to come forward. So the topic of the circle is, how does this organism interact with its environment? What are some of the inputs it needs? What are some of the outputs it seeks to create? And and circle process, so you can always pass. We'll maintain the order, and you can always pass, and we'll keep going until people feel like they've said what they need to say. April, over to you.
Is the land the organism, or is the land the context within which the Lifeboat Academy organism is held? That's a question, because I'm confused.
So this okay, so it's a contextualizing question.
Yeah.
Well, I will say I am drawing on my limited understanding of Indigenous worldview, which is the land and the people and all of our relations are a symbiotic whole. So the land, when we talk about the land as an organism, we're talking about the ecosystem of, this chunk of territory, the soil, the water, the weather, the animals, the plants, and the people. And so does that help? Does that make sense of it?
That does make sense. I understand that in terms of that being there. I'm not sure where the permeable membrane is going. Is it going around the Lifeboat Academy, or is it just a huge metaphor for everything that's out there?
I would like to try my hand at my perspective on that. I think yes, Absolutely, all of that. So one of the things that we talked about in one of the other sessions is how things are fractal. So there it the and in the same way, um, yeah. So everything is fractal. So there is the land writ large, which I will call the planet. And then there are different organisms that are make up that land and fractally so. So I think that for me, the Lifeboat Academy is one of those organisms. So the Lifeboat Academy is part of the land. It's not the land, and at the same time, it's part of the land. And so what we're talking about is the Lifeboat Academy as a cell among many other cells and is interacting with those cells. So yeah, so
Mhm.
there's exchange that happens between cells of equal size, and then there's exchange that happens with cells of smaller and larger size in as well. And so we're using, I think that's how I'm understanding this analogy. Yeah, does that does that make sense? Does that
Yes,
help?
I just needed to know it was a cell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's-
And I think the other thing that might be helpful there is I think it is useful. One of the other lessons learned that we came up with in our first session was having something material is really useful and valuable, like having your hands in the dirt. So I think actually the 47 acres that Roland and I are sitting on right now let's think of that as the primary organism.
Okay.
And then but it also is like mycelia, where it's hard to say where the center is, you know. So, and I think that's part of the interesting question is like, what is the nature of this organism? And I think, but let's anchor it. The expression that we've been using lately is we hope that Spalding Valley is the anchor for the lifeboat network. So, it's here and concrete and material and connected through these mycelial strands to other lifeboats around the world. So back to you. If that makes sense, then back to you, April.
That does make sense. Thank you. I just needed a little bit of clarification. And I do understand living systems and understand fractal replication, I guess you'd say. I was just confused of what we were using as the anchor, I suppose. So thank you for that. And was there a question I was supposed to be answering as well?
Yes. How does this organism relate to its environment?
I guess the answer to that is in the same way that any other organism does, which might not be a helpful answer. But remembering that that there are natural laws that are part of it, I suppose. Some people call that science. And that there are some ways that things work best if you pay attention to stuff like biomimicry or, the different levels of the fractal view. I think that's all I want to say at that point, and I'm passing on to Cam. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that was a great interruption, April, because I was also like, what? So thank you. I always say if there's a question, it means a bunch of people have it, right? So good one. Yeah, I'm thinking about one of my mentors who's in Surrey, and she was always talking about closing the loop. She was always giving me a hard time. She said, compost is cheating, Cam. And she said, you bring your trash to the landfill, it's also cheating. And she showed me this site on her land where the folks from many years ago had to keep all their garbage, and so she said we didn't used to get to do that, right? So that's on a physical level. And then I was also kind of interested in the idea when you're talking about organs and what makes something work as a cell. I was thinking about it's easy for me to think about things like compost because they're inputs and outputs, and that's simple for me to think about, hard to execute. But what's really cool is when I think about some of the real value y'all have already created, it's how to actually make people work together in a functional way so that they're a functioning maybe organ to help the land be supported. Does that make sense? So when we think about something like we want to regenerate the soil, well, all the folks have to get along, right? We have to have our processes, circle processes, maybe a tiny little, tidbit of that, but all of your ways of getting along as a community are what's going to support the land. It's kind of a fluffy idea, but maybe that's an organ. Anyways, on to Pam.
Okay, foreign territory for me, so I'm just going to be try talking here. I'm thinking of an organelle, like of all of these little, the cell contains all of these little pieces that have to metabolize, work together, and so on. And if that's a metaphor for the Lifeboat Academies, which seems to, I guess I'm thinking the Lifeboat Academy has many different aspects to it. There's a legal structure. There's a conceptual structure. There are the relationships between the people who identify as members of it. When you're thinking about how does it interact with its environment and the I don't know how to this is such an interesting puzzle to encounter. I'm thinking though of flows of energy, of course, and all of those ways in which I'm wondering how to make it more concrete and meaningful in that way of taking it out of the metaphor into the actual fractal experience of what it is to be a member of the Lifeboat Academy in relation to all of the people, the structure, the sociocracy, the English language, all, the unceded lands, the land, the animals. It's a big question, and I've just completely found myself now at the bottom of the pool, and I'm going to pass it over to Roland so I could come up for air. Thank you.
I think this is actually very cool. So what I was thinking is that the way that I've been trying to think is, and I think I'm doing a lot of paraphrasing or saying things the same thing but in a different way. But we're trying to move away from the Cartesian mechanistic way of looking at the world, this sort of like linear, and trying to adopt. And there have been all sorts of models that have been proposed over the years. One of them is, in terms of biomimicry, it's the mycelial. There's another one too, and I can't. Oh, Cam, you would probably know the word for this. What are lilies? Daylilies. Their roots are what? What are they called? There's a theory that uses that term.
Is it when they're rhizomes, like when you chop
Yeah.
it and you make a new one? Yeah.
Yes, there's a rhizomatic theory. I don't even know if it exists anymore. This is like from 15, 20 years ago. But these theories that are referring to natural systems. So for me, it feels really natural to contextualize things in terms of natural systems. So yes, Cam, you get a prize. We'll send it to you in the mail. So when I've been thinking in terms of, well, what do I see happening on the farm? and how does that fit in the story or the analogy of a living system, like a cell. I think in terms of microorganisms, where they actually have a cell wall that is that's permeable, where there are they absorb unabsorbable things that need to be transformed, like raw mineral in order to make them plant available. And the way that they do that is that they put out exudates for other microorganisms to go and get them the nutrients that plants do that. Sorry, plants put out the exudates. Microorganisms come and then they go out and they get what the plant is asking for, and they come back and they give it to the plant, which gives energy to the plant to be able to then say, hey, I need this now. And then they go out. And it's a little bit, and so I was thinking about one of the things that's been long-standing in our thinking is farm stays or agrotourism. And if you use that and and in my mind, when I'm trying to fit it into the analogy, there are people who come and they bring things with them. They bring knowledge, they bring energy, they bring their bodies, their ability to do things. They bring money, like, to be frank. And then they leave that behind, and in exchange, they get the exudates from the farm. They get knowledge, they get learning, they get increased collaboration. They may get actual produce. So they get things and they go out and they live their lives, but they have this connection with the farm, and that connection can come back in all sorts of different ways. Either other people that they've talked to, they come back themselves, they come back with new ideas. So that's how I'm understanding the farm as, or the Lifeboat Academy. And I'm sorry, I have not yet learned to think of the farm as being an organ of the Lifeboat Academy, even though we're focusing more on the property now. So I'll be saying the farm, and I mean the Lifeboat Academy, and I'll try to be clear. Anyway, so this is how I've been conceptualizing the analogy and how it relates to the farm, just as one example. And then it's sort of like, okay, well, if I'm thinking about, if I use my example of the um, uh, farm stays, then what do we need for the farm stays? What do we need for that organ of the being that is the Lifeboat Academy to function? So what are the exudates that we need to put out to be able to get what we need to be able to set that up? So over to Ben.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm always amazed and impressed with how well Circle works in terms of these things can go from really fuzzy and then start to take root, because like that image of the farm stays as our mycelial partner, like, and that whole relationship of, what are the exudates that we put out that attract the that yeah, that back and forth. And that I mean, I just had an aha with that's really part of the boundary. There's sort of the farm as farm, farm as with the farmer caretakers and the people that are here planted. And then there's this constant wave of in and out that's happening. And that, yeah, so that's really cool. And and we talk a lot about the flow of energy too. And I think one of the things that came to me, and I think one of the outputs that I'm hoping that we'll have is that it's the individual transformations, kind of, Cam, what you were talking about in terms of we need to heal the people to heal the land. Like, we need, and so there's a transformation that happens, and to put it overly simplistically, people come in, colonized Westerners, and eventually walk out relational, integrated. Or that's the dream, right? So that it's something about, and that's tricky. I think this is one of the things that we've been struggling with is we want to attract people who aren't there yet, right? It's not like a members only, like, we want people who are, and so they're going to be attracted for different reasons than they're going to, they may not know why they're attracted in the first place. Something like that. And so how does that fit in terms of, yeah, well, I think it's what are the exudates? So the exudates that attract the people in are not necessarily the same things that they all, there's something else in that they leave with. It's almost, this multi-stage exchange. You come for one reason, the transformation happens, you leave with something else. So over to you, April, or back to you, April.
Thank you. This has been really helpful. I think, I'm reflecting back on what Cam said about maybe the feeling states and the social states that happen as part of the system are just fluffy. And I'm here to say they're not fluffy at all. They are very hard-nosed, actually, in terms of survival and resilience. And the outputs of all that, what could be seen as fluffy stuff, or has been in the past called soft skills or touchy-feely or whatever. And I'm here to tell you, I'm never going to be touchy-feely with any of you. Let me just reassure you. But I will be hard-nosed about social stuff. And out of that stuff that we've sort of been talking about, we get flow and flex and trust. It takes some time to do that, but this is a generator of that too. It also, the whole system relies upon and rides the rails of collaboration, but that's a set of learned skills, and to put it all together, I think, takes quite a lot of time. Within that is the social relations, the acting relationally, and the recognizing connection as it happens. And 2 or 3 of the past things that we've worked on this Miro board are trying to make visible connections. Well, not just trying to, they are making visible the connections, the ones that we built, the ones that were there and we didn't know before, and what their relationship is to a whole bunch of other stuff. The conditions, I think, under which things can transform in this system are the invitationality linked to the integrity, and living under those conditions for a while, and being allowed to be human, but not going outside of the boundary that makes sense if we're all trying to work in this together, is those are the conditions within the boundary, I think. I'm also having some insights into the fact that if you're going to work in this way, if you're going to work so that you all get part of the product and make it kind of really clear how that happens, you have to have accepted high cooperation. And that's different than collaboration. It's one of the things that you need to have, and you need to have people accept that. If you don't accept it, you need to cooperate in order to make this thing work with flow and flex and everything else. You're not going to be able to be part of it. You will never kind of get subsumed in as just one of the other things, I think, in the environment. The other thing that occurred to me within this, when Roland was talking about the sort of intermediaries between the raw materials and the plant, and you had a term for whatever that intermediary was, I'm starting to think maybe that is sort of a brokering function that some bit of the Lifeboat Academy, like the Stewardship Council, actually could play. The in-betweenies, the one thing that gets moved over to the other thing. And if that happens enough, then there's transformation, I think. Oh my goodness. The other thing that I know is that within this, we need to always apply the agreements to everything in the system and everybody. That again is one of the sets of conditions that makes this possible. And over to Cam.
April, you had an AHA festival. It was so juicy. Good one.
Sorry, it went on
it was great. I was firing off with you. It was a good one. What were you saying about the fluffy and the firm? And it was so helpful when you put it that way. It reminded me of some of my old classrooms, and I was thinking, I had a principal once tell me, he came into my classroom and he said, "Cam, have you done any team building with the kids?" And I was like, "Oh shit, no." And so he taught me a lot about, how if you can't make a group, then they're not going to work like a group or a team. And so I think I had jumped right into a math lesson or something on my first or second day, and he was like, "No, no, 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 honey." And so he took me through like basically a whole like month plan of team building for my year, right? And I was like, "What?" So yeah, I can't agree enough that the fluffy things are actually the most important, and without them, none of the other bits, happen. No one gets fed, no one gets housed, no one gets along for very long, right? And so it's cool when I'm kind of drawing a few bubbles of potential organs and maybe what an organ is. And I also agree with you that there might be a whole organ that is just kind of like an outreaching organ. It's like a tentacle organ, and it does some kind of outreach or exchange, or, there might even be two, like maybe one's an educating organ and the other one's like a collaborating organ, or a straight up outreach organ that does those kind of home state things. Those could all be different organs. And so, yeah, this is very cool. I'm going to pass it on to Pamela.
My brain hurts. I'm not sure if I have anything to, I mean, some of the, one thing that was coming to mind, and I have no idea if it's at all applicable, but because I'm coming from the ER space, Eleanor Ostram's principles for governing a commons are what comes to mind in the shared purpose and identity. I don't know how that is languaged into this context. And other than that, I'm just going to shut up right now and pass it over to you, Roland.
Well, this is really interesting, and I want to continue to have this conversation for as long as it's useful. And I'm also thinking about the graphic that we were looking at, which part of what we're doing together is starting to populate it. And so I'm thinking, okay, we're agreed. And actually, I was thinking, I really like the distinction, and I think I'm going to need to talk to you more for it to be clearer for me. The distinction you made, April, between collaboration and cooperation, something like that. I'll need to talk to you more about it. Um, and that within a living being that happens, so if we're continuing with that analogy, um, uh, what does a living being need inside itself to be able to survive? And one of the things is to be able to communicate with other beings, because we're part of a larger system. And it's acknowledging that we're part of a larger system, and that we are able to learn to work with the larger system in a healthy way. So I guess I'm wondering about what are the parts that the Lifeboat Academy / the farm on Spalding Road need. What are its parts that it needs to be to feed? And actually, as a living thing, it's always in transformation. So, I think we've gone from embryonic, and I don't know if we're beyond that point, but there are things that are still developing. So what do we need now in order to be able to allow for this being, this organism to get to the next stage of development of its growth? So I will pass that to Ben.
Yeah, and I feel like you might be sensing into, it feels like there might be a bit of a shift coming up, but I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think that that last question is really key too, is it's like where, that's part of the question. Where are we? How does this creature interact with its environment? And right now, I think it's still embryonic. And so that means that there needs to be some sort of host, like yeah, like that an embryo is kept in a protected environment, because it's not quite there yet where it can kind of fend for itself. And I also I think, April, I wanted to know how you're differentiating flow and flex, and what flex means too. I think that was an interesting distinction. I'm all about flow, and so adding flex seems like a good idea, and I want to hear more about it. And I think that because I am starting to think in terms of organs, and I think I can't even remember who was talking when it came up to me, but it's immune systems, right? Organisms also need an immune system. And I think, oh, actually, April, it's when you were talking about that, like, sort of the deep cooperation is necessary. And and I can tell you from lived experience, not everyone's capable of it right now. And those collaborative skills are not universal, and they're not and there's a level of I think it's a level of intergenerational trauma that comes from systems of oppression that some people are not there yet where they can be integrated into something like what we're talking about. And I think that it's not even a question of preventing it. It's actually learning how to respond to it. And I think that the agreements, and it reminds me of the Eleanor Ostrom stuff. And I think a little wrinkle on it. I've always, part of my experience as an organizational development consultant is very early, I soured on values-based anything, because too often it becomes a series of weapons that people use. It's actually something I'm noticing about pro-social that I think is a real Achilles heel, is that it gets lobbed at people. You're not being pro-social, and it's a judgment, as opposed to it being kind of, and the same with values, is people in groups, we identify aspirational values, but people don't actually live those values in the organization. So you get this real schizophrenic situation where people talk about, and it actually aggravates things. If you're in a workplace where, I mean, like I've worked with these where they ascribe work-life balance as a high value, but all of their day-to-day is you will suck it up and you will do what you were told, and you'll work until it's done. So where am I going with this is I think, and I think I feel fairly comfortable that we've identified the core agreements. April, you were talking about, like people can be imperfect, and that's not a problem. People not being saintly or not being always enlightened is not a problem. And I think the big thing is it's actually the relationality and the concept of harm and response. You have a responsibility if you cause harm, intentional or unintentional, that you have a responsibility to try to heal the relationship. And there are some people who can take responsibility for any harms that they've created, and there are other people who can't. And I think that that's one of those. It's the same, I think, with the idea of experimentation. It's like, it's not about getting it right or wrong. That's okay. But are you reflecting and learning from what worked and what didn't? Or that the alternative is the Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. So anyhow, I feel like maybe I'm talking more about that immune system, and or maybe some of the functions of the permeable membrane, that it's not about always getting it right, but it's about willing to learn from mistakes, a willingness to address harms, and a willingness to learn from mistakes seems like it's really key. So, and I think in the spirit of process, let's see if we can get through. We've been talking about how this organism works in the environment, and the next question is, what are the function or the organs of it? Let's see if we go one more round talking about, if you have any other thoughts around how the organism is in the environment. Let's see if we can get that out, and then switch. And I think then rely on going back to the diagram and starting to talk about what those organs are, what those functions are. So April, over to you for possibly our last round, unless we find otherwise, our last round talking about the environment.
And I'm planning to be brief. Just to note that flex, in terms of a system like this, is my way of thinking about when I give way for the greater good, and when I don't have to be stuck in trying to feel right one way or another, and being buoyed up by the understanding that it will come back round to me to not give way at some point. And so it's flexing around that and being smart enough to do that on a good day. It helps if I'm not tired and hungry when that comes up. But it's that sense of being buoyed up by everybody around you cooperating and collaborating, and that I won't, parking my ego at the door to the meeting room, at least, knowing I won't get my way necessarily, and that's just fine. And there is a heaving a sigh that comes with that, a sigh of relief. The other thing is that, I'm starting to look at these organs as functional areas, and that we just need to give them a name. Are they going to be a liver and a pancreas, or are they going to be farmy stuff, or I don't know, one of the other things that we already kind of identified. That's over to Cam.
Yeah, I'm happy to start naming things, and I think I'll follow y'all's lead on what they should be called, but starting to feel more concrete. Over to Pam.
Me too, Roland.
Let's do it, Ben.
Well, all righty then. Let me expand this and click that, and there we go. All right. So again, you have the link, you have access. I'm thinking I haven't thought through exactly how this part is going to work. But I think let's just keep the circle going and maybe talk through. Let's see if we can settle on what some of those organs are. We've already kind of mentioned some. And the one thing I want to add is just a practical thing, because one of the considerations right now is, I guess because we're embryonic, you know, we can't have a super complicated number of organs because there aren't that many people, and and we need to animate those organs. So, that might mean that we end up clustering a few functions. Actually, this is a great metaphor because that's embryos work like that. Like they sort of start with these kind of generalized organs that slowly start to divide out and become more specialized. So anyhow, over to you, April. What are some of the organs, some of the functions that we need to have?
Well, it seems to me there's a whole sort of a bag of things that's Lifeboat Academy related, and then there's a whole bag of things that are animals and that sort of thing, animals and farmy stuff. Over to Cam.
Yeah, I'm kind of with April. Like, there's sort of like two categories. I thought there'd be like an outreachy category, then like money stuff, people stuff, and basic needs. So there's just kind of the four for me. Like, I thought of them as one is the heart. So it's like a community, social structures, conflict resolution. One's kind of like the brain or the shallow, you got to get the money in, financial piece. The other one's like more of a body piece, like shelter and food. Soil and stuff can be in there too. Yeah, that's the more farmy piece. And then the outreach piece is like education, collaboration, and an outreach to get folks in now. On to Pam.
Yeah, I'm going to be basically fly on the wall with this one, but the thing occurs to me is that there is the environment, and the cell does not exist, or any organism does not exist in isolation. It is always in relation to the context in which it's embedded in the environment, and I'm not sure how you want to word that or name it, but that's my take at the moment. And Roland.
Earlier, I think Cam mentioned tentacles that reach out. That has stuck in my mind. So I am now seeing, tentacles reaching out as a way of connecting. And anyway, I also think about, and I was talking to Ben earlier, and I'm going to mention it. It's something that it's a principle that we often refer to, the what the fair share footprint. And the fair share footprint, the way that it's conceptualized, it's like what are the basic needs that a person needs, and we can expand that to what are the basic things that an organism needs, and it's food, shelter, I would say actually society for the type of organism that we are. So food, shelter, fuel, society, and if you can think of anything else, that's what I can think of right now. So and is so I think that we've already started talking. I can see in the notes that Ben is taking. I think that there are already things that respond to to that. Yeah. So I think I'll just leave it. I'll leave it for like that, because I think I'm starting to bamboozle myself. So over to Ben.
Yeah, I'm liking the, I'm thinking, well, I would put in, I think there is kind of the immune system. And I think there's also, because the part of the tentacle, this might be mixing metaphors. It may all just be tentacle, but there's also like, sense organs, eyes, like scanning out there, seeing what's out there. And I think that that's kind of maybe the money stuff in a way, because a lot of the money stuff is really about, it's not, there's a part of it that's what's happening on the farm, but a lot of it is sort of like to maintain obligations off the farm, you know. So yeah, and I'm liking this, and I'm thinking if we, so I'm looking at the notes here, and we've got our basic needs body. So I'm wondering if it's because the whole thing is kind of body, but let's go with body. If we think of body as food, shelter, muscle, it's the maybe it's blood actually. But so there's that stuff. I'm trying to figure out how to mush it down into, a smaller number. But it seems to me like there is, yeah, I'm bamboozling myself as well. I think it feels like we've got the raw material here, and it's just a matter of kind of consolidating it, and I'm not sure how to do that elegantly. So April, go do that elegantly. Fix it, make it better. Over to you.
Oh, the bamboozlers are getting me now. um, There's something that's speaking to me in this about where does the nurturing go? Is that in the heart or is that in the body? The nurturing and protection as stuff grows and happens. Maybe that's your skin. I don't know. And I wonder if, the fuel and energy isn't actually the money included in there. It's not the only thing that provides fuel or energy, but it's more along those lines, really. And I just remembered something about octopuses. I have all this wonderful general knowledge that swims around my head, and you never know when it's going to be useful. This might be a moment. I learned the other day that octopuses, in their tentacles, have got their brains. So they do not have a centralized brain system. They have brains in all their tentacles. So it's different than the human construction. But that could be some sort of distributed thing that can be part of this in a bodily sense too. So we don't just need a brain, maybe. I guess we need a brain and a nervous system that's distributed differently. So see, now it's getting late in the working day and I'm starting to make up things about, hey, we could be an octopus. Anyway, over to Cam.
This might be one of those weird moments where we're letting the metaphor get the better of us. So maybe maybe we can even think backwards and say, you know, let's say somebody has financial skills. What bubble of things could they do? Or somebody has team building skills and community facilitation skills. What bubble of things could they do? Somebody else has, education skills. What, you know, maybe we can think of it backwards. Let's not worry about the titles of things. Let's worry about what bubbles they fit in together, and not even give them the title if that helps, you know? On to you, Pam.
Oh, Cam to my rescue. Yeah, because what I found myself wondering about is where the fun is, where the creativity is, where the art, the music, the dance, the conviviality, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of going in the direction you're suggesting, Cam. And that would, I guess, in some ways be hard, but it's all those things too. And Roland, just in case you don't remember, Roland, it's your turn.
I'm starting to think that maybe the new mascot for the Lifeboat Academy should be the octopus. Well, because really the idea of the distributed brain and the sociocratic circles or the guilds, the different guilds where which creates this sort of horizontal structure. So anyway, I like octopi. And I was thinking along the same line as you, Cam. I think that the analogy is starting to take over. So in my mind I was thinking in terms of guilds and what are the basic things, and I like the idea of grouping what we already have. But I was also thinking when I need a place to live and visitors need a place to stay. I need to eat, and people who come to the farm need to eat. And the only way that they will be able to come here to be able to stay and eat is also that they need to know about it. And then there's the overarching, then how is that fueled? And I think, right now, well, money isn't the only fuel. I think that this is fuel. This is the collaborating and cooperating is the fuel. It's also bartering can be the fuel. Sort of like fuel is sort of the interaction of the materials, maybe. So that's my 2 cents. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I think this is all, it feels like it's all coming together. So there may be a little refinement, but if one lump is, and just for not to get too misled by the metaphor, but the physical material body part, food, shelter, warmth, the social connection, celebration, culture, fun, how we relate to each other. The brain sensing system, like the forward planning. So, logically thinking through what do we need, how much money, who gets, that kind of thing. The immune system, which I think is separate from, there's a people element to the community part, but there's also that HR part, kind of conflict resolution, problem solving, onboarding. So it's more like the immune system. And then the tentacles, and this is where I'm wondering. Yeah, no, I think that makes so part of the brain is the sensing, so that's also sort of scanning the environment, seeing what's out there, and the tentacles are actually reaching out, going out, grabbing something, and making the contact. So it's so what does that give us then? We've got heart, immune system, brain, body, and tentacles. And whatever creature you make by putting those together. So that's 5. That seems like a really good number. And in a way, I agree with you, Roland. In a way, maybe the brain is it's the frontal lobe. So it can be this distributed, because I think, yeah, with the sociocracy, obviously there's brains in all of these parts. But this feels, I'm feeling pretty good about that. So that's where I'm at now, is heart, immune system, brain, and nervous system, maybe, and that's to deal with financials. And that I like that. And because I don't like dealing with financials, they make me nervous. Body and tentacles. So that's what I'm having at the moment. Over to you, April.
I don't think I'm having anything at the moment myself, which probably means it's the end of my attention span. But I am wondering, what were the names of the functional areas before the new diagram happened?
Finance and fundraising, relations, farm, and trying to remember the other. Do you remember, Roland?
We had the farm broken up
Oh,
into
and ambassadors.
a
Yeah.
lot, right?
And then there was a 5th ring, wasn't there, that hung off the side that was Lifeboat Academy?
That's always been one of those. That's great. I'm sorry, I'm just so amused by the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. We've always struggled with the relationship between the farm physical location and the Lifeboat Academy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's always been one of those back and forth kind of things.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to stop share and then I'll go. I have it written down. I just have to go look at it. So continue the conversation.
Okay, I was just going to say, does it make any difference? Like, are these interchangeable then, these names, or is one a different set of concepts than the other one? I don't know. I'm just asking that because I can't see it clearly in my head right now. I mean, this latter set of the list that you have up in the corner relates to living systems and organisms more so. I mean, that's kind of what it's the lens of. And it seems to me it makes sense that we should align with living systems as much as we can, because there is a truth in that. And indeed, there are natural laws that operate within these systems. And if you go against the natural laws, like by clear-cut logging, then you have trouble. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that now. And on to the pocket knife emporium, Cam.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool that maybe those categories are similar to before. That seems like, not a bad thing. And maybe you can add pieces to them and see them in, like April was saying, see them in the analogy that's like an organic analogy. But yeah, we also even though, you know, we want a wonderful closed cycle and we want those things, we also do have to make a lot of compromises, especially at the beginning, like, you know, because you're embryonic, you do need that host, and you're gonna need more inputs, and, you know, forgive yourself in advance. We live in capitalism still too, right? So yeah, I think it's a good sign that we're coming up to something you have come up to before, roughly the same categories is maybe a good thing, and add the extra pieces in. Okay, on to you, Pam.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to it other than deep appreciation for being on this ride. It's been quite fascinating for me, and thank you. So on to you, Roland.
Oh, I didn't have to unmute myself. Sorry. Um, um, yeah, I don't think I have much to add. Um, I'm wondering what's the next step. I may be jumping ahead, so forgive me if I'm jumping ahead. So I'll just pass it over to Ben.
No, I think we're sensing into this seems to be the natural end of this session. I think we have done some really good work. I agree that it's good that it's similar, but I'm noticing that we have clarified some perennial challenges that we kept facing when we were trying to slice and dice things. So I looked at what we did is we said there's the Lifeboat Academy, which is, you know, more than the farm, and there's the farm. But then there were a couple areas where we couldn't decide where things went. So on the farm, we needed facilitation, but then facilitation was also part of the Lifeboat Academy. So was it one or the other? And likewise, hospitality, housing and hospitality was, well, it's, you know, you need hospitality when you're here on the farm, but if you're here learning lifeboat stuff, isn't that part of the Lifeboat Academy, or is it part of the farm? And is a visitor to the farm on the Lifeboat Academy, or blah, 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 blah. And I think this clarifies that. Likewise, I think sort of separating out the heart and the immune system also clarifies a lot. Because there's a sort of a conviviality aspect to it. And they're not, I mean, obviously none of these are mutually exclusive, but there's that kind of conviviality part, but then there's also the like making sure things are clear and functioning part in how we're collaborating. So yeah, this feels really productive. And in terms of next steps, I think I always knew that we're going to have to do a little bit more work to kind of clarify what the RFP part is. But really, it's just now that we have the organs, it's going back to the resources that we've identified and saying which resources does each organ have access to, and likewise the goals. And I think the goals are going to sort themselves fairly clearly into those areas. So I feel I personally have enough to go on, I think, to move to the next step, which is to start to invite people to our new octopus guilds. So yeah, I think good work, team. I think this was, you know, considering we started off with a very kind of messy, vague, let's kind of talk about things until it makes sense. I think we've done a pretty good job. So in that spirit, and since we're all fading a little bit, let's just do one wrap up round. Once around the circle to say your goodbyes and any last thoughts for the good of the cause. And over to you, April.
No thoughts till tomorrow. So contact me again if you want more thoughts tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. This is such fun. But really, I want the mural board, and I want it in big sheets, and I want it hanging on my walls. That might be a practical problem, but I think it was a good one. So over to Cam.
April, I feel like I should show you one of my walls. And it's
Yay!
One of my roommates asked if I was trying to solve a mystery. I said, kind of. So this one I call my wonder wall, and it's this book I'm reading about soil, and it's everything I wonder. Once I read something, I wonder more. So can't echo that enough. Keep on learning. Okay, Pamela.
Oh, wow. Ending on a wonder wall. That's pretty darn good. Yeah, it's been wonderful. Roland.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was really interesting to actually just as we were moving forward, noticing what was going on inside my own body of like what's going on and where are we going, and oh, this is really interesting, and oh, there's this idea, and feeling things starting to coalesce. What I'm curious about now, I was just thinking of the mural wall and how wonderful it is that we can just access it. So is there, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot because there might not be anything, but is there or could there be sort of and maybe if not now, then an email instruction on what to do on the mural wall with what we came up with tonight? Or is it that the core team will take what's been produced tonight and sort of rationalize it onto the wall? So I guess I'm still on the next steps kind of track. Over to Ben.
I was assuming that the core team, primarily led by me, I took a lot of notes when we were not sharing the Miro board. So I have a lot of all the comments that people were making. So we already started talking about we need, the organism needs this and some of the functions. So I can go back to those notes and pull out the ones that seem relevant and just populate the board. So I'm just gonna, the organs, I'll go with, for now, we'll go with heart, immune system, brain, body, tentacles, and then populate it based on the conversation. And then at that point, I think it might be good to send out an email to say, so here's where things stand prior to the charrette. And yeah, do that kind of we can do that as part of our weekly update too for next week. Yeah, so awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm always amazed. I'm learning more and more to do a trust fall and, just throw out questions and wait and see what comes up when you weave together different perspectives. And I'm going to say rarely, because I try to avoid always and never. I want to say I've never been disappointed. I can't think of an instance when I've been disappointed. And I certainly wasn't tonight. So thank you all for being here and for playing along, and stay tuned. Keep in touch. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.